Jacqui Turner, good afternoon. Welcome to the Sundale podcast. Uh, I could use your proper title, which is I believe, customer service dancing queen. Um, sounds like an ABBA greatest hit, but anyway. um, Jacqui, how are you? Welcome to the podcast.
I'm very well, thank you, Oliver, and thank you ever so much for inviting me onto your podcast. And you're absolutely right. Customer Service Dancing Queen is a name some of my followers gave me on LinkedIn. So yes, as I say, it's great to be with you here on a Monday.
Indeed. Well, that's right up our street. The podcast, we cover a range of things that are all covered around customer service being and customer experience being the core part of that. We do delve into technology, but I know your background is much more on the people side of things and the brand side of things. So we're going to delve a little bit into that today and get some of your insights with the customers you've been working with and I suppose, the challenges they have faced and how they're overcoming those challenges. And we might sprinkle a little bit of technology dust on top of that, but not very much. You'll be delighted to hear. So aside from being a dancing queen in the world of customer service, do you want to give us a little bit of background then, Jacqui, to what you do, what your business does, and how you work with customers?
Yes, absolutely, Oliver. So I've been running my business, Turner Corner Learning Solutions, for coming up to 8 years now. But prior to that, I worked in a variety of different contact centres, working for large organisations, which you might have heard of, such as HSBC, Lloyd's, Tesco, Customer Engagement Centre. Um, and throughout my career, for the last, I think it's 20, coming on to 28 years now, I've been a trainer and coach. But one of my passions throughout working, across those organizations I've just mentioned and whilst setting up my business is really about customer service and service excellence. And so, I very much now am about helping as many different organizations, big or small, in helping them really to stand out, build their brand loyalty, and really deliver the type of service that each of us, including yourself, I'm sure, Oliver, that we expect. And, where the opportunity is to go over and above those expectations as well. And, one of the key reasons why I'm so passionate really about customer service is because it affects us all in
Yeah.
day-to-day life. So that's a little bit about my background really, and what I'm really focused on. I'm passionate about doing. Since I've been setting up my business 8 years ago.
So over that period of time, from working with some of those large organizations to obviously what you're doing today, I'm sure there are some core fundamentals that haven't changed in the industry and in customer service. I'm sure there are plenty of things that have changed, but people is center to customer service, regardless of whether that's through a contact center or whether that's customer service we expect if we walk into a retail high street store or we're having our dinner in a restaurant in the hospitality industry. And I think a lot of those traits are the same. Do you want to talk a little bit around the how central the human aspect is to particularly things like brand loyalty?
Yeah, so I often talk about, and I won't apologize for this. Often talk about how it's the little things that have a big impact on customers. So, for example, husband and I were in a well-known coffee shop, a chain coffee shop, just yesterday, and I'm avoid sort of dairy products, etc., etc. And so my husband ordered an oat milk latte for me and a decaf because it was sort of late afternoon and he likes to sleep. And he ordered a decaf coffee for himself. And when the young lady, brought the drinks, he just sort of asked again just to check, is that an oat milk? And it wasn't. And she rolled her eyes and sighed, and then had to make another one. And then exactly the same when he double checked that that was a decaf coffee for himself. And again, the same thing. So it's those little things, that, anybody working in customer service, has to realize it's the impact that those little things can have. So just a smile, using positive language. And, for me, it's not about, and I think for anybody really, in terms of brand loyalty, it's about that consistency, isn't it? So I want to feel that, if I'm going into a restaurant, if I'm picking up the phone to phone a contact center, that I'm going to be speaking to somebody that takes pride in what they do. They love speaking to customers. They really want to deliver a best level of service, not because they have to or because they're paid to, because they actually enjoy and value the role that they have, and they really want to make I guess a positive impact on their customers. And that often starts, as I say, with the small things. It's the smiling, it's the yes, certainly I can do that for you. It's the focusing on, positive solutions. And I often talk about, please don't start your conversations with the word unfortunately, because we all know what's coming next when we hear that phrase. And yes, okay, you can't always deliver what a customer requests, but there are often alternatives. So, when I'm delivering any training, I really encourage people to really focus on what is it you can do. So start your conversations with what you can do. But as I say, it really is about just those little things that may not necessarily, I guess, encourage a customer to go online and write a positive review, because it starts with, I expect to have a good service, but I
Yeah,
will write a positive review if I get that good service, that great service over and over and over again. So it's that consistency.
I think you're spot on. It is the consistency, and I think where organizations have been challenged is how to scale that personal touch. Similar to yourself, I have an anecdote which I often use about the coffee shop as well. It does seem to be the best anecdote, but we quite close to the office where I'm based, where I when I'm not traveling. There's quite a nice little. It's not a chain. It's a little boutique or locally owned, locally run coffee shop, and I do tend to call in there first thing in the morning. And probably about a year ago, we splashed out in the office and got a really fancy, all singing, all dancing coffee machine, and I could literally do everything. But I still go to that coffee shop in the mornings because there's a little bit of banter, as we would say. There's a little bit of to get to know you. And to me, it's okay, it's whatever it is, 3.45, £3 for the £3.50 for my flat white, but it actually sets my day up and I enjoy it. And it, I don't have to spend the money in the coffee. And if I didn't have that little bit of enjoyment or that little bit of discussion, and obviously to get to know you over time, and there's a few regulars there, and that's the sort of brand loyalty. Now I know that that's obviously at a very small scale, and I think maybe you could elaborate a little bit on this. I suppose the challenge for, you mentioned some large companies there at the outset, HSBC and Tesco. So the challenge for those companies, how do you keep that personal touch but scale it out to, particularly if it's a contact call center environment where you are measuring average handle time, cost per call, and all of those things. Again, is that a challenge you see, and how you see an organization trying to overcome that at scale?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, as I say, because I mentioned my background is in a wide variety of different contact centres. And, I started my career, at the age of 19, 20 on the phones, delivering service and having all those measures in terms of average handling times, etc. Thankfully, I think certainly the majority of the clients I work with are starting to move away from measuring AHT. Because of the pressure that it puts on, certainly, call handlers, in a contact center environment, thinking that, yes, I haven't got the time to personalize that conversation, because I'm being measured against how long this conversation is. But also as well, it's to help, I think, customer service advisors understand, any measure is usually an average. So there
Mm-hmm,
will be
mm-hmm.
conversations that are naturally very short, because you have your customers that, are very to the point, very
Yeah,
busy. They don't want any, what I call the fluffy conversation. It's very much about, get to the point, etc. But knowing when to balance that as well with potentially, you might have a vulnerable customer, for example. And I know I mentioned to you, earlier, that one of the things that I've been really helping to support companies with is really supporting vulnerable customers. Now, vulnerable customers often need that longer duration conversation. They need to have that patience, an understanding person that they're speaking to. And so, hopefully, as I say, majority of companies are moving away from our average handling time, but also reassuring, I think, advisors that yes, you will have those shorter, you will have those longer conversations, but it's important to personalize and show that customer that you're listening, you understand, you care. But of course, managing as well, keeping control of that conversation without necessarily just taking it off, in a different direction for too long a period of time. So it's really about, I think, developing the skills of any customer service role, whether that's face to face or on the phone, to understand how to manage and control those conversations, but at the same time, take the time when it's needed to show that patience, understanding, and really personalize that conversation based on the needs of the customer.
Yeah, and just leading on from that, I think sometimes brands get confused or maybe try to apply personalization in the wrong way when it's still very scripted. Again, another example, I've actually had quite recently, I'll not name them, but it's a logistics company, and I was expecting something delivered to the house. I had to contact them 3 times, it didn't arrive. But every time I contacted, and I was over a chat, but it doesn't really matter whether it's over chat or call or whatever. But clearly it was a scripted interaction from the agent, because every time the interaction started with the same, how's your day going today? And that was the first thing they said. And I thought, like, okay, I know what you're trying to do. You're trying to personalize this engagement, but this is the third time now I've had to come through. I know it's not. I know it's a script. So it's actually having the adverse effect on me, as in, get to the point, I'm now getting quite irate, and you're doing, quote unquote, what you said, the fluffy stuff. How do you, so you do a lot of coaching on the agent side or the staff side. So what are the sort of things you're looking for in terms of trying to coach and trying to avoid those scenarios where clearly you do need a script, and clearly you need to make sure that, salutation is correct, that the opening is good, that the call is handled in the right way, or interaction, and the send is correct, etc. How do you get over that clearly scripted into a much more a degree of structure, but not scripted approach with the employee side?
Yeah, I think the first thing is to say is avoid scripts.
Do they still exist, or is that only was I just unfortunate in that? But this was clearly a script. I was feeling like, what scripting application are you using? Because you need to change. Felt like asking them, but
absolutely. So yes, of course, there's certain processes that you have to go through, such as doing DPA checks, for example. But that doesn't necessarily mean to say that you have to start the call in exactly the same way. That it has to be that rigid with scripting. And it starts, I think, with yes, once you've asked that open question, asking a customer, how may I help? And that for me pops into my head a little bit of a bugbear, Oliver. Sometimes when I get through, I do not want to be I don't want the first question to be asked, can I have a reference number? I'm not a number, I'm a person. So ask me how you can help, find out who I am in terms of my name, and then there's time to then be asking me for reference numbers, etc.
yeah.
But I think it's also important to listen to your customer closely. Are they showing that they are, frustrated, they're agitated in some way? And so if you've got a script that is, encouraging, an advisor to sort of always ask, oh, you're having a good day, etc., then without thinking, they're likely to then go ahead with that script. Well, is it appropriate if your customer is sounding really angry, frustrated, agitated, something, has gone wrong, then absolutely not. So it starts with, really encouraging advisors to really listen. And there's no room for multitasking in listening. So one of the things I often say is if you're asking for reference numbers, the first thing you're asking for, what is that advisor going to do? They're going to put that into their system. They're going to be reading the system while a customer is then relaying what the reason for their conversation. Yeah. So they're not paying that close attention. So it starts with there is time to then take that information, pop it into your screen, and then read and let the customer know that you're reading their account details or going through their account. And then hopefully there's a record on there of previous conversations, etc., so that you're then personalizing the conversation based on those previous conversations, as you say, Oliver, not asking the same scripted questions over and over. And again, it's nice though, if you are a loyal customer, going back to what you were saying, Oliver, about the coffee shop near yourself. I've got some local, restaurants, coffee shops, etc., that my husband and I go into quite frequently. And it's the same if you're ringing a contact center on a regular basis. It could be that you're loyal in terms of your purchasing, you're shopping with that company on a regular basis. So one of the key things to personalize, I think it's nice to be acknowledged that you are a loyal customer, isn't it? So, does your coffee shop acknowledge that, it's nice to see you again, Oliver?
Of course, and they start to understand a little bit about, and I understand over, large volume and large scale, it's not always possible and you're relying on systems. But I find it interesting what you were saying there about not having scripting. And I'm coming from a technology background, so we tend to do a lot of the automation and systems within contact centers. And what I find, and I think this is a little bit strange, that on the one hand, while when it's a human interaction, they tend to script it and not have that "how can I help you today" question right up front. But on the other hand, when we look at implementing technology, one of the first things our customers who are buying the technology will look to do is have what we would call that intent recognition up front, because that drives how you can then behave, how the system can behave. And I just find it kind of illogical if that's what they're doing at a technology level. Why not constantly adopt the same when it's a human interaction level? Find out what their problem is, understand exactly things like their sentiment. Do they come across as sort of angry or tired or frustrated, and then deal accordingly. And obviously, yes, if you can get the CRM pops with previous case history, etc., we can also do that. I find it a little bit strange that organizations are not more and more taking that back.
Absolutely. And, as part of obviously my business and my job, I often, check the UK Customer Service Institute, their satisfaction reports, which I'm sure they produce, 6 monthly. So, and it's interesting, over the sort of 3, 4, 5 years that I've been sort of really sort of, looking at that report, customers' needs and requirements haven't changed dramatically. So I think it's about 56% or so of customers will say that their influence in terms of how satisfied, how loyal they are to a company brand is if they feel listened to and they feel understood. And I think that starts with the initial part of a conversation, doesn't it?
It does, yes. And as you say, I find it strange that companies are not focusing more in terms of that ability to listen to their customers. And another thing, and again, maybe this is a vendor-driven thing. There's lots of thought now in the tech aspect of it around employee satisfaction, or EX. So traditionally, we've had customer experience CX. Now it's sort of called the EX. And what are you seeing on that employee side in terms of, multifunctional teams, cross teams, silos, even, within an organization across teams? Do you see much of that, and how, if it does happen, do organizations look to combat that?
Yes. So again, when I started my career, I was working in insurance. I was a claims assessor. And I know that it was really frustrating for me when, I was trying to deliver the very best level of service that I could for my customers. But I may not have communication that I'm waiting on from a loss adjuster to make a decision, or the admin team haven't updated the customer's policy, so that was causing a delay, etc. And any lack of communication, any lack of understanding, about, the impact that one team has on another team, particularly, as in customer service, really does make it more difficult for frontline staff to deliver a great level of service to customers. And, I've been working with some housing associations recently in terms of one of the key things that they've, got in touch with me about is they've noticed, that having those silos, having people in different parts of the housing association, all relying on each other to deliver the best level of end service to their customers. But there was a lack of communication amongst teams, causing unnecessary delays. There have been, instances where there's a lack of certainty in terms of accountability. So you might find people duplicating work because they're not aware that somebody else is already accountable for that. But in terms of the end service, having silos within an organization, not only does it make employees feel isolated, not only does it make employees feel frustrated when they can't get the information they want. Another software company that I worked with recently, I went in actually initially just to deliver service training to the operations team, the people that are having that direct initial engagement with their clients. And I lost count of the number of people said, yeah, this is all well and good, we're having this, but we can't deliver the best level of service when actually the design teams, the project teams, etc., are not keeping us updated. So I think you should come in and actually deliver this training to everybody. And guess what, Oliver? The company listened. But it is important for people to understand that the strong purpose that they have within the organization, but understanding the impact that they have on another team, another department, and certainly the impact that they have on the the customer service teams. And so really, I guess, what I often talk about is you can't deliver service excellence to your customers or to your clients if you don't have internal service excellence. That's everybody understanding the piece of the puzzle that they are, but also understanding the impact that they have on each other and therefore communicating and collaborating with each other.
And do you find that pretty prevalent, that lack of communication across teams within the organization? Again, I remember, and it is some years ago when we were working with was a white goods retailer, and they had a problem, excuse me, around a product launch. And there were some issues with a particular product, but they hadn't briefed the front end CX, the customer service people, around the product. So of course we've got a flood of calls coming in, and the customer service people were really not aware of what was happening, what the issues were, and it led to this sort of cycle of frustration, both internally and externally. And I thought, well, that's some years ago. Does that still exist, that type of, or those types of silos?
In my experience, yeah, it is, both from a customer perspective. So when I'm a customer myself, this is something I've noticed, on a regular basis, contacting a company, they can't give me the information, they're not sure who's dealing with it, or they're waiting on information. And I'll give you an example. Even though with the UK CSI report, I think the top 3 companies, I think Timpson's, Nationwide, and John Lewis. And John Lewis is often up there in terms of, customer satisfaction. Yeah. But even the best, of the bunch in terms of companies that get a high customer satisfaction level can't afford to rest on their laurels, because even they can get things wrong. So a recent example of this, of people not knowing who is accountable or not understanding the impact on the customer, was I bought a dressing gown. This was back last year. So I bought a dressing gown, got it home, and then realized there was no belts with it. So I was doing some training in Solihull. And my husband, who was also sort of decided to come and he had a couple of business visits, client visits he had to do, and he popped into Solihull. And he popped into John Lewis with the dressing gown. Now, you would think it would be very straightforward, wouldn't you, to just ask them for a belt, because there were still some dressing gowns in the store. Oh no. So either this person didn't know that they were able to, and therefore didn't have know, their accountability with this, but actually told us no, we'd have to pick up the phone and ring the customer service centre in order to then get a belt sent out to us. But when my husband did that, he was then passed in back into the store and ended up speaking to a lady who was working in the dressing room. And she even said, she said, I've got no idea why you've been passed through to me. So does it happen? Is there, a lack of communication between teams, a lack of accountability and knowing that people's responsibilities? Yes, in my experience, both as a customer, but also with many of the clients that I've been working with, it is a challenge. And I do, I love working particularly with SMEs because SMEs, I think, are in a great position, more so logistically than larger corporates, because,
Mm,
if you've got 100, 150 employees, then helping those employees to understand each other's roles, responsibility, to arrange job shadowing, for example, across departments, all of that is logistically much easier for somebody like myself to come in and deliver training to every employee to help them to understand how they can deliver a great internal service to each other. Again, can be easier to do. Large corporates that I worked with in my career, then when you've got thousands of employees and they're based in different centres, in different offices, in different locations in the world, that's a challenge. And so I think, creating that internal service excellence, I think, yes, it's common, it's a common challenge. But I think in terms of SMEs, they're possibly best placed to be able to meet
mm,
that challenge. And, I love working with SMEs because I'm obviously a small training provider. And my competitors are often larger, corporate training providers. Well, the SME as well are often trying to sort of get that brand loyalty and compete with larger organizations. So, I love it when I'm working with SMEs, really helping them to build their brand loyalty and stand out. And internal service excellence, getting rid of those silos is a key part of that.
yeah, I mean, and I would have assumed, well, not assumed, but I would imagine the level of innovation that you can see within the SMEs is often a lot better, or a lot more than the larger corporates. By mere fact that the SME maybe doesn't have the budget, doesn't have all the things that a large corporate has, and therefore needs to innovate in different ways. And I don't mean innovate on technology, I mean in terms of how they engage with internally and externally. And I think, yes, if more large corporates could take a leaf out of the book of the SMEs at time, I think customer service and customer experience in general would be in a much healthier state than it is. And it's often lambasted as again, as it is. And one thing I suppose, and I don't know how much do you see of this within organizations, but it's kind of always struck me as strange. I think I know part of the answer to this. Um, People dealing with the customers in the customer service space are often not properly trained, and often there's high churn rate. And when you think about it, ultimately the customers of a business is probably their most important asset. And why is more time not being spent to ensure the right people are engaging with those customers to ensure longevity of relationships from brands, etc. Why does that? It seems just obvious to me that you should be doing that. Is it because it's hard to measure, hard to quantify, or are there other reasons there why we're not more focused, or organizations are not more focused on the value of customers, and therefore investing heavily to ensure they are getting the value?
Sorry, I didn't quite catch the last part that you said then, Oliver. Do you mind
So
repeating just that last part?
no, it's just so that, as I said, customers are often the most valuable asset within an organization or for an organization, but yet in all organizations do not invest heavily in managing those customers or facilitating those customers, i.e. the customer experience is not heavily invested in it. It's seen as often seen as a cost center. Why do you think that is? Because it should be obvious that if customers are really important to you, we want to invest in sure they get the best service possible.
That is a difficult one to sort of try and get inside the head, I guess, of senior leaders. Again, speaking from experience, it starts with equipping your teams with, with what I call service mastery skills. So, investing in, in ongoing training, on ongoing coaching support, is for me a starting place, because if companies, are focused on, their customers and delivering a great level of service, it starts with focusing on investing in your staff, doesn't it? In terms
Mm-hmm.
of employees. But what I've noticed in my career, when any cost, efficiency takes place, any cost cutting, and that might be due to, spending, a greater amount of the budget on technology, for example. And, the most obvious at the moment is, of course, AI. Then
Runaway train, but yeah.
it's a balancing act, isn't it, between, yes, okay, as a business, particularly if you're a small organization, to balance, you want to be competitive, you want to deliver a great level of service, and AI technology is a big part of that. But then often what can happen, again, I can only talk about my own experience, is then the thing that gets cut first is often training. So, companies then, stop for a period of time in investing in their staff, etc. It might be what is a common terminology in the contact center world is the bum on seat scenario,
Yeah.
where you're bringing in people, particularly this time of year, at Christmas time. And one of the companies I worked with, the retail organization, used to bring in a lot of temps around Christmas time. But rather than bring them in early enough to give them the right level of training, it was often a very quick, give them some basic training, put them, out on the job. Is the customer then getting the best level of service?
Yeah.
Absolutely not. So I get that it's a balancing act between, obviously, technology, training, budgets, etc. But for me, you know, and I am biased, of course I am, because I'm a trainer. But if you're not investing in the skills of your staff, then how can you expect your teams to deliver the best level of service, particularly during those challenging, busy periods? And so, even if it's not a sort of face-to-face training course, investing in e-learning refresher sessions. I often offer, refresher masterclasses, which can be recordings, which companies can buy for a very small budget. So it's looking at ways, what's on offer there that can come within a smaller budget that is still enabling staff to get some form of investment in their skills via training. So I guess it's just about thinking outside the box a little bit, in terms of, rather than no training, how can we train our staff in a different way, in a more cost-effective way?
Yeah, and I think, when I said I think you know part of the answer, and I think I do, a lot of it's about trying to be innovative in how you deal with customers. But when you mention innovation to any organization, they will immediately think technology, and therefore will immediately think, well, we spend in technology to get a return on investment. They don't immediately think about innovation in terms of staff, employees, customer service, customer support, and how can you innovate there? And I'm sure you can. And yes, when you mention things like training, it's seen as an overhead, it's seen as a cost. And I think organizations struggle to sort of make that connection between the investment, often in people, be that training or other services, and brand loyalty. Brand loyalty is it is hard to measure. It's longer term, it's kind of easy to measure, because it's just about your growth ultimately, and your growth in customers and your recurring customers, etc. But it's hard to measure maybe on a rolling 12-month basis. So you actually have that brand loyalty gone up. Have you seen any organizations trying to be innovative in that sense of actually measuring brand loyalty? I know you have normal things such as CSAT and NPS scores. Is there anything you've seen around that that allows organizations to tie back the investment they have in training and in people to a real hard metric that says, and this is increasing our brand loyalty by X?
There isn't any that spring to mind. I think, majority of clients that I work with, the SMEs tend to be more NPS. Internally, many employees don't like using NPS. They don't think it's, it's an objective of a valuable sort of way of measuring, which is always interesting. So even though the SME business measures NPS, internally employees that are telling me they don't think it's a great way of measuring satisfaction or loyalty. And of course, contact centers tend to be very much around CSAT. It tends to be around, I think for me, it's not so much innovative, but it can often just start with the basics in terms of customer feedback. If you've got an online presence, you've got a wealth of customer feedback there that's giving you an indication in terms of what is working well for customers, where are customers saying they're dissatisfied, etc. So, I can't think of necessarily an innovative company that I've worked with in terms of measuring brand loyalty. I think there's very much a consensus, whether it's CSAT or NPS or customer retention rates or customer lifetime value measures. They tend to be, the most common.
Yeah.
But I think sometimes it can be, as I say, when I mentioned earlier about simple things have a big impact, it can be often start with the basics in terms of, are you really listening to your customers? And, that for me can be from your customer facing teams, your customer service teams. How often is a company, is an operations leader, a senior leader speaking to their customer service teams to really sort of understand from their perspective, what are customers saying to you this week or this month? Because yes, some customers will stay on a call after the call to fill in a little survey, but not all. But I think you can, the best people to really gauge how satisfied your customers are your customer service teams. So start by actually talking to and listening to your teams.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very, very valid point. Relating back to the story I mentioned earlier about the logistics and the delivery of the package. To me, the problem was quite straightforward, and I would have thought that the customer service agent had been trained correctly, they would have been able to pick that up without asking me at the end of the interaction to do the survey, which I didn't do at any stage because I was that annoyed. But I didn't need a survey, or I felt the customer service agent or the organization actually needed a survey to understand what my concerns or feelings were. So yeah, you're right. I think, I don't know how much of that floor walking goes on, how much the senior people within our organization actually listen to the calls, the customer service, the engagement level to actually understand, does that happen? Or is it all numbers metricated in terms of whatever the KPIs happen to be?
It does depend, I think, on, again, sometimes the size of the organization and the sector that organization is in. So larger contact centers I've worked with, it does become more of a norm that you have team leaders, floor walkers, you have team leaders sitting down, listening to calls, side-by-side coaching. Although, again, during busy periods, that can sometimes go by the wayside as well. But when I worked in one particular organisation, what they did very well was to ring fence coaching. So even though it got to busy periods during Christmas time, etc., and the build up to that, they ring fenced a certain amount of hours per coaching. Again, there was a lot of communication across departments, so team leaders knew when they were able to coach and who was coaching in different departments, so they wouldn't be able to that particular day. So, there are things I think that can be done, but smaller organizations, even though, as I say, I'm a big fan of SMEs and a lot of things that they can do really well because of the size of the organization. But in my experience, what sometimes isn't done as well within smaller organizations, and it could be again due to less manpower, resources, etc., they don't tend to spend as much time coaching and supporting one by one and listening to calls. And for me, as a trainer, if I go into an organization to deliver a training course, or if an internal trainer is delivering a training course, if a company wants to get a high return on investment, but also if the company wants to see long-term changes in the staff that have gone through that course, you absolutely must provide coaching support afterwards. Because as human beings, we create habits, don't we, for ourselves?
Yeah.
Some of the things we've been doing for 20, 30, 40 years or more.
And some of them not very good habits either, but yeah.
And our subconscious mind, wants to pull us back to doing those things that we've always done. And so, it's not unusual for a group of employees, a team of employees to come out of a training course. They're brimming with enthusiasm. They're saying, yeah, that was really good. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this differently. And as a manager, you can see them making those changes very, very quickly. But within 2 or 3 weeks, they're back doing what they were doing prior to the training course. And that's not their fault. That's the fault of not having that coaching support embedded as the norm after somebody's attended any sort of training event. So I think, it's often about just recognizing that, yes, training is important, investing is in your teams is important, but that follow-up coaching support is absolutely critical.
Yeah, it's not a one hit wonder, so to speak. It's an evolution and an ongoing, and it has to be obviously ingrained within the organization as well. And this is where I assume a lot of it leads back to leadership, values that the organization possess. As you mentioned some of them at the outset, and it's clear when you look at some of those, such as John Lewis, and then their values are evident. Another organization that I happen to know quite well would be IKEA, and the same thing, their values are evident. And I think that just as a natural consequence then comes through in their customer experience, how they deal with their staff deal with themselves internally, but as well as how they deal with customers from the external perspective. I'm conscious we're coming up against time, Jacqui. I did say we'd sprinkle a little bit of technology into this, but we'll not go deep. Obviously, the world has been shook up a little bit of customer service in the last couple of years with the advent of AI, etc. So do you feel, if you look forward maybe 5 or 10 years, will you still have a job? Will we still have customer service agents? Will people still need to be trained to actually deal with, or will AI deliver everything for us?
That is the question, isn't it? I can understand people, particularly, in a work environment, particularly in contact centers, wondering what that future would look like. I've asked myself that question. Will I still be needed in 5, 10 years' time? There are some companies out there already that are generating AI images of trainers, etc. I did actually go on to one a few months ago, but it was quite scary because there was somebody speaking my words, but they didn't look anything like me. So I'm not a big fan of that at the moment. But I
wish I could have that on my behalf. Somebody has sounded like me, but looks absolutely nothing like me. My voice is better than my image, I have to say.
But I think, I'm excited about what the future looks like. I know you've had some AI experts, as guests on your podcast that are great friends of mine as well. So Simon Chris and Chris Gillen, they're both great, and I do learn a lot from them as well in terms of what potentially is coming up, with regards to AI. But I think my key focus, in terms of what I do, is really helping businesses wherever I can to really I guess, help with the skills and the confidence for the future of a customer service advisor. Because I know when I started my career, how I got through the day was you had the very simple queries embedded amongst the more difficult conversations. It wasn't difficult conversation after difficult conversation. Whereas, where I see the future going, and I know, both Simon, Chris and Chris Gillen have talked about this, is Yes, automation, is a great thing where it works really well for customers. If I've got a simple query, I just want a quick answer, I'm quite happy to go on an
Yeah.
automated system. I don't want to sit in a queue. The downside of that, and I think where companies need to prepare their advisors, their customer service teams, is they're going to be potentially dealing with those more difficult conversations,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
problem issues, complaints more regularly because the easy stuff will be sort of dealt with in an automated way. So it's really, I think, I've been for quite a number of years delivering emotional intelligence as part of customer service training because I know the challenges and that and the emotions that you go through when you work in customer service. And so helping people to develop strong emotional intelligence skills, being able to manage their stresses, the challenges that they have day to day, but also going in and helping advisors with decision making, problem
Mm,
solving skills, so that companies empower their agents to make more decisions. If you're going to move the easy stuff into the more difficult conversations for agents, then you need to empower them as well.
yeah.
Because if I was working as an advisor now, I would not want to be dealing with those difficult conversations and then having to check with my team leader every step of the
Yeah.
way in
Yeah.
terms of
Yeah.
what decisions I can make. So, yes, I still think there's a lot of need for people like myself to go in, but the type of training may be slightly different. So it might be, whereas now I might be, starting with the basic call handling skills. I see that changing in the future in terms of me really sort of spending more time helping people to problem solve, to decision make, and to really handle those
Yeah.
complaints in the right way.
Yeah. No, I think that is spot on, and I think you're right. That there's, for people like yourself, I think the world will only continue to open up because there is more and more training required. Because you're absolutely right. The more complex queries or take longer to solve. They require much more thought process. They require much more things like understanding empathy, etc. So, I think your job is safe, public, considered, exactly. Um, long may you dance into the continuing world of customer service in the years ahead.
I have been known to do a little bit of dancing in the training room.
Well, listen, Jacqui, it's been great to chat to you. Thank you very much for your time today. Insightful and wonderful. Thank you very much and continued success.
Oh, thank you ever so much, Oliver. It's been an absolute pleasure talking about my favourite subject, but also great to chat with you as well.
You too. Listen, we'll chat again. Thank you, Jacqui.